Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going behind the scenes, kind of taking a look at the U.S. Air Force's Purchase Request Process System.
Or as they call it, PRPS.
PRPS.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Eh.
PRPS, you've sent us some really in-depth material on this. A performance work statement and a hefty technical data package.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty intense, right?
It might seem a little dry at first glance, but trust me, this system is way more interesting than you might think.
Oh, okay.
It's the backbone of keeping all those incredible aircraft in the air.
So not just a bunch of forms and spreadsheets, then?
No.
You're saying this is mission-critical stuff?
Absolutely. We're talking about the nuts and bolts, literally, of a multi-billion-dollar operation.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Every time a pilot takes to the sky, PRPS has played a part in making sure that jet is ready to fly.
All right, I'm intrigued. So our mission today is to kind of figure out how PRPS actually works.
Yeah.
What makes it so complex and why the Air Force is pouring resources into keeping it cutting edge.
Right.
Let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
What exactly does PRPS do?
Imagine this. The Air Force realizes they need a critical part for a fighter jet.
Okay.
Maybe a replacement engine or, a specialized sensor. PRPS is the system that takes that need and turns it into a reality.
Right.
It handles everything from creating the purchase request to getting approvals for the funds, all the way to sending those final purchase orders to the contractors who supply those parts.
So it's kind of like the Amazon of the Air Force,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing with a lot more red tape.
That's a great analogy. And here's the thing, it's all done electronically.
Oh, wow.
No more mountains of paperwork.
Okay.
Everything is handled through a web-based system.
That has to save a ton of time and headaches.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to, track down a paper trail for a missing jet engine or something.
Exactly. Plus, speed is crucial in the Air Force.
Right.
PRPS transmits information in near real time, which means they can get those essential parts and repairs done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, in their line of work, every second counts. Okay, so who are the people behind the screens making all of this happen?
Right.
Who actually uses PRPS?
So the documentation mentions over 3,000 users across multiple Air Force bases.
Wow.
We're
Yeah.
talking about a diverse group here. Item managers who keep track of the inventory, engineers who design and spec out the parts,
Yeah.
production management specialists who ensure that everything is running smoothly,
Yeah.
and even screening technicians who are hands-on with the aircraft.
So we're not just talking about desk jobs here.
No.
This system touches, almost every aspect
Yep.
of keeping those planes in the air.
Exactly, which is why it is classified as mission critical.
Okay.
If PRPS goes down even for a short time, it can have a ripple effect throughout the entire Air Force.
How critical are we talking?
Mhm.
Like delayed flights critical
Okay.
or grounded planes critical?
We're talking potential grounding of aircraft
Right.
critical.
Wow.
The documentation actually states that an unplanned PRPS outage of more than 30 minutes triggers a whole contingency plan.
Yeah.
That's how seriously they take this system.
That's intense.
Yeah.
It makes sense, though. If you can't order parts or schedule maintenance,
Right.
those planes aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing PRPS isn't as simple as,
Right.
ordering something off Amazon.
No.
There's got to be a lot more going on behind the scenes.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah.
PRPS isn't just a standalone system.
Sure.
It interacts with a whole network of other systems, both inside and outside the Air Force. Think financial systems, systems used by other branches of the military, and even external contractors.
Okay.
Keeping everything synced up is a huge challenge.
So we're talking about a pretty intricate web of information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any glitches in one part of the system could have, major consequences. No
Exactly.
pressure on the folks who manage PRPS, right?
Right.
So to add another layer of complexity, the entire system is hosted on the Air Force Cloud One.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're getting into some serious tech territory. Cloud One, that's their secure cloud platform.
Yes.
Right.
It's where they store and manage all their critical data.
Okay.
This adds a whole other dimension to security and resilience, but also
Yeah.
brings in a whole new set of technical challenges.
So with all this complexity, how do they keep PRPS up to date and running smoothly
Right.
in a world where technology is constantly evolving? New threats pop up every day.
Yeah.
Software needs constant updates.
Right.
And the needs of the Air Force are constantly changing.
Uh-huh.
And-
That's where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
To handle all of that, the Air Force has adopted a very specific process for managing all the updates and changes to PRPS. It's called the Agile process.
Oh, agile.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of agile development. It's like all the rage in the software world.
Yeah.
But I'm not a programmer, so
So
can you break down like what that means in this context?
think of Agile as a way of working that embraces flexibility and collaboration
Yeah.
instead of one massive update every few years.
Hmm.
It's about making constant small improvements and adapting to new information and feedback quickly.
Okay.
In the case of PRPS, we're talking about something called Scrum teams,
Okay.
sprint planning, and lots of direct communication between the developers who write the code, the testers who make sure it works, and the people who are actually using the system every day.
Okay. So it's not just about writing code and pushing out updates. There's a real human element to keeping PRPS running smoothly.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about creating a continuous loop of feedback and improvement, which is essential when you're dealing with a system as critical as PRPS.
Okay. So we've got this complex system that needs constant updates, and they're using this agile approach to manage it all. But what about the actual like nuts and bolts of the technology itself?
Right.
What's powering PRPS behind the scenes?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that they don't rely solely on Microsoft products for everything.
Oh, okay.
They actually use a mix of open source software like the Glassfish application server and an Oracle database.
Wait, open source?
Yeah.
I thought like government systems were all about, proprietary software and big contracts.
Yeah, you would think so. But
That's pretty surprising.
It is. And it speaks to a real shift in how even large organizations are approaching software development.
Okay.
They're realizing that open source solutions can offer greater flexibility and cost savings.
Okay, color me impressed.
Yeah.
So they've got this open source server, and they're using an Oracle database to manage all that data. But what about the tools they're using to build and update the actual software? I mean, this isn't your average app.
Right.
We're talking about, a mission-critical system here.
Right.
They can't just be using Notepad to code this thing.
No. They have a whole suite of specialized tools to ensure everything runs smoothly and securely.
Okay.
For version control, they use Bitbucket.
Now remind me, what is version control again?
Think of it like a track changes feature for code.
Okay.
It allows developers to keep track of every change they make, who made it, and when. This is crucial for collaboration because multiple developers are often working on the same code simultaneously.
Right.
And it's essential for being able to revert to previous versions if something goes wrong.
So kind of like a safety net for the development process.
Exactly. Then they use Jenkins,
Okay.
which is a tool for automating a lot of the building and testing process.
So instead of like manually running tests
Yeah.
every time they make a change, Jenkins can do it automatically.
Exactly. This frees up the developers to focus on more complex tasks.
Right.
And ensures that tests are run consistently every time.
Okay.
And for managing the dependencies between different parts of the software,
Well,
they're using a tool called Maven.
dependencies. That sounds complicated.
Think of a software program like a car.
Okay.
It's made up of many different parts.
Right.
The engine, the transmission, the wheels, all working together.
Yeah.
Maven makes sure that all the parts of the software work together seamlessly, even as the software evolves and changes.
Okay. So it's kind of like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure all the instruments are playing in harmony.
That's a great analogy. And they don't stop there.
Oh.
They even use tools like checkmarks and Sonar Group to scan the code for security vulnerabilities.
So it's not just about making the system work, it's about making sure it's secure from, attacks. Makes sense, given how sensitive this data is.
Security is absolutely paramount in this context.
All right. So we've talked about the agile process, the open source software, the fancy tools for building and testing. But with all this technology,
Right.
how do they manage the human side of things? How do they make sure that everyone involved, the developers, the testers, the people actually using the system, are all on the same page?
Well, remember how we talked about Agile being not just about tools, but about a mindset?
Yeah.
That's where the human element comes in.
Okay.
The Air Force has implemented specific practices to foster a culture of transparency and teamwork.
Okay. So it's not just a bunch of, techies coding in isolation.
No way. They hold daily Scrum meetings
Okay.
where everyone on the development team gives updates on their progress, identifies any roadblocks they're facing, and gets help from their teammates.
So it's a way of keeping everyone in the loop and addressing problems early on before they snowball into, major issues.
Exactly. And at the end of each sprint, which is a short period of focused work,
Okay.
they hold sprint reviews where they demonstrate what they've accomplished
Yeah.
and get feedback from the product owner and other stakeholders.
I imagine that feedback loop is crucial for making sure the updates are actually meeting the needs of the users.
It's essential.
Okay.
And then, of course, there are those all-important full deployment decision meetings,
So,
where everyone comes together to give the final green light for an update to go live.
so they really are pulling out all the stops to make sure the system is running smoothly and securely.
Yeah, you are.
It's fascinating to see how they've taken a process that could be incredibly bureaucratic and turned it into something that's actually quite dynamic.
It really is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, okay.
In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore the challenges of testing and maintaining a system as critical as PRPS.
Okay, I'm hooked. I can't wait to hear more about, how they put this system through its paces.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back with part 2 of our deep dive into the world of PRPS.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're right in the middle of unpacking the U.S. Air Force's PRPS, and honestly, it's way more fascinating than I ever imagined.
I told you it would be.
Okay.
And we've only just begun to explore how this, seemingly simple purchase request system is actually a technological marvel.
Before we went to our very short break, we were talking about how the Air Force uses the Agile process to manage updates to this mission-critical system, along with a whole array of specialized tools to make sure everything runs smoothly and securely. But there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about yet, testing. I mean, with a system this important, they can't just push out updates and, hope for the best.
You are absolutely right. The Air Force can't afford any downtime on a system as critical as PRPS. Imagine if they couldn't order parts or schedule maintenance, those planes wouldn't be staying in the air for very long. So they have a very rigorous testing process to make sure that any updates or changes are thoroughly vetted before they go live.
Okay, so walk me through this testing process. What does it actually look like?
Well, think of it like building a house. You wouldn't just start putting up walls without making sure the foundation is solid, right?
Definitely not. One crack in the foundation and the whole thing could come crumbling down.
Exactly. So the first stage of testing for PRPS is called Component Validation and Integration, or CV&I for short. This is where the developers make sure that each individual component of the update works as intended, both on its own and when integrated with the rest of the system.
So kind of like making sure each brick is strong enough and fits properly before you start building the wall.
That's a great analogy. They're also running a whole battery of tests during this stage. Functional tests, performance tests, security tests. They want to be absolutely certain that the update doesn't introduce any new bugs or vulnerabilities.
Okay, so they've tested all the individual components and made sure they work together. What's next?
Well, once the update passes CV&I, it moves on to qualification test and evaluation, or QT&E. This is where they bring in the actual users to really put the update through its paces.
Ah, so this is where the rubber meets the road. They're taking it out of the lab and putting it in the hands of the people who will be using it every day.
Exactly. It's like a test drive. They want to make sure that the update not only works technically, but that it also fits seamlessly into the user's existing workflows.
So are we talking about pilots trying out the new system or mechanics ordering parts?
It's actually a mix of folks. We're talking about the Air Force's functional managers and end users, the people who rely on PRPS to do their jobs. They're checking everything from how easy the update is to use to whether it can handle the volume of transactions they need to process on a daily basis. And of course, they're looking for any potential security issues.
So they're not just checking if it works, they're checking if it actually makes their jobs easier and doesn't open up any new security holes. Makes sense.
Right. And this is all happening in a realistic environment, as close to the real world as possible. They're not just clicking around on a test server, they're using real data and simulating real scenarios.
Wow, this is way more involved than I ever imagined. So if the update passes QT&E, is it good to go?
Not so fast. There's one final hurdle before an update goes live. It's called the Full Deployment Decision, or FDD.
Okay, what happens during this FDD? Are we talking about a bunch of generals sitting around a table making the final call?
It's not quite that dramatic, but it is a crucial step. The FDD brings together all the stakeholders, the developers, the testers, the functional managers, the security folks, to review the results of all the tests, assess any remaining risks, and make the final decision on whether the update is ready for prime time.
So it's like a final quality control check to make sure that all the boxes are ticked.
Exactly. And remember, they're dealing with a mission-critical system here. They can't afford to take any chances. They need to be absolutely confident that the update is going to work as expected in the live environment.
Makes sense. So once they give the thumbs up, the update is finally pushed out to everyone.
That's right. But even after the update goes live, the work doesn't stop. The team continues to monitor the system closely, looking for any unexpected issues and gathering feedback from the users.
So it's not just about pushing out updates and forgetting about them. It's about continuous monitoring and improvement.
Exactly. And that's really the essence of the Agile approach. It's not just a set of tools and processes, it's a mindset of constant iteration and refinement.
Okay, so we've talked about the rigorous testing process, the emphasis on security, and the agile mindset. But I'm curious, with a system as critical as PRPS, what are some of the unique challenges they face? I mean, this isn't your average software project. We're talking about the Air Force here.
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of what makes managing a system like PRPS so complex.
So lay it on me. What keeps the folks who manage PRPS up at night?
Well, for starters, there's the sheer scale of the system. We've already mentioned that it interacts with a vast network of other systems, both within the Air Force and externally.
We're talking about a lot of moving parts.
Exactly. And keeping all those parts in sync is a constant challenge. One small change in one system can have a ripple effect throughout the entire network.
So it's like a giant interconnected web. Any disturbance in one part of the web can be felt throughout the entire system.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's the issue of security. We've already talked about the rigorous testing they do to ensure the system is secure, but the threat landscape is constantly evolving. New vulnerabilities are discovered all the time, and hackers are constantly developing new ways to exploit those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so it's not just about building a secure system, it's about constantly staying one step ahead of the bad guys.
Yeah.
That's got to be a lot of pressure.
It absolutely is. And then, of course, there's the challenge of keeping up with the rapid pace of technological change. The Air Force can't afford to be using outdated technology, so they have to be constantly evaluating new tools and approaches and figuring out how to integrate them into PRPS.
So it's not just about maintaining the system, it's about constantly evolving and improving it.
Exactly. And that requires a lot of flexibility and adaptability.
Okay, so scale, security, technological change. Those are some pretty big challenges. But I'm also wondering about the human side of things. How do they manage to attract and retain the talent they need to keep a system like this running smoothly?
That's another great question, and it's something the Air Force takes very seriously. They know that people are their most valuable asset, so they invest heavily in training and professional development for their workforce.
So it's not just about recruiting the best and brightest. It's about making sure they have the skills and knowledge to stay at the top of their game.
Exactly. And they also work hard to create a culture that values expertise and innovation. They want their people to feel empowered to contribute their ideas and take ownership of their work.
So it's not just about following orders, it's about fostering a sense of ownership and pride in the work they do.
Exactly. And that's one of the key reasons why the Air Force has been so successful in managing a system as complex as PRPS. They recognize that technology is only part of the equation. It's the people who make it all work.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about the challenges of scale, security, technological change, and talent management. What are some of the other key lessons we can learn from the Air Force's experience with PRPS? I mean, this system is obviously unique in many ways, but are there any takeaways that we can apply to other complex projects, even in completely different fields?
Absolutely. One of the biggest takeaways is the importance of embracing a culture of continuous improvement. The Air Force doesn't just build a system and then forget about it. They're constantly looking for ways to make it better.
So it's not about achieving perfection, it's about constantly striving to do better.
Exactly. And that means being willing to experiment, to take risks, and to learn from your mistakes.
That's a great point, and I think it's something that a lot of organizations struggle with. They get so caught up in the day-to-day that they forget to step back and think about how they can improve their processes.
Right. And another key lesson is the importance of collaboration. PRPS isn't managed by a single team or department. It's a collaborative effort involving people from all different parts of the Air Force.
So it's about breaking down silos and bringing people together from different disciplines to work towards a common goal.
Exactly. And that requires strong communication skills, a willingness to listen to different perspectives, and a shared understanding of the overall mission.
It sounds like the Air Force is really putting a lot of emphasis on the human side of technology management.
They are. And that's something I think more organizations could learn from. Technology is important, but it's the people who make it work.
Well said. And I think that's a great place to pause for a moment. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, from the challenges of testing and maintaining a mission-critical system to the importance of collaboration, continuous improvement, and investing in your people.
We have. And it really highlights how the Air Force's approach to managing PRPS has valuable lessons for any organization dealing with complex projects.
Stay tuned, because in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to zoom out even further and explore the broader implications of the Air Force's approach to software development. We'll examine what lessons other organizations can learn from their experience and how they're pushing the boundaries of what's possible with technology. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been kind of exploring all the ins and outs of the U.S. Air Force's Purchase Request Process System, or as we know it now, PRPS.
Yeah.
And honestly, what started as a pretty mundane topic has turned into like a fascinating journey into cutting-edge technology, rigorous testing, and this whole culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, really highlights how something as seemingly simple as buying spare parts for airplanes can be so complex and sophisticated, especially when you're talking about a system as vital as PRPS.
Right. Like, who knew there was so much going on behind the scenes? But now, in this final part of our deep dive, I think it's time to kind of like zoom out a little bit. Yeah. We've talked about the technical details, the testing procedures, the challenges, all the lessons learned. But what does it all mean in the grand scheme of things? What are the like broader implications of the Air Force's approach to managing this mission-critical system?
That's a great question. And I think it's important to remember that the challenges that the Air Force faces with PRPS aren't unique to the military. I mean, lots of organizations today are grappling with similar issues, managing these complex systems, ensuring security in a threat landscape that's constantly evolving, keeping up with technology, and attracting and retaining top talent.
So what can the rest of us learn from the Air Force's experience? What are the like key takeaways that we can apply to, our own projects and challenges?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of having a clear, well-defined process. The Air Force has a very specific process for managing every aspect of PRPS, from the development and testing to deployment and maintenance. And that process is constantly being refined and improved based on feedback and experience.
So it's not about just like winging it.
Yeah.
They actually have a plan and they stick to it?
Exactly. And that plan isn't set in stone. It's a living document that evolves as the system evolves and as the needs of the Air Force change.
That makes sense. I mean, in a fast-paced environment like the military, things are always changing. They need to be able to adapt quickly.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key takeaway, the importance of agility.
Oh, yeah.
The Air Force has embraced this whole agile methodology for software development, and that has enabled them to be much more responsive to change.
We talked about that earlier, like how agile is all about making these small, incremental changes and getting constant feedback from users is very different from that traditional like waterfall method of software development, where, you spend months, even years, planning and building a system before you ever even release it to the users.
Exactly. Agile is all about being iterative and adaptable. It's about acknowledging that you don't have all the answers up front and that you need to be able to change course quickly as you learn more.
And that's a valuable lesson for any organization, not just those developing software.
Absolutely. I think another important takeaway from the Air Force's experience is the importance of investing in your people. They recognize that technology is only part of the equation. You also need a highly skilled and motivated workforce to manage and maintain that technology.
Right. Like we talked about how they invest heavily in training, professional development, and how they foster a culture that, values expertise and innovation.
Exactly. They understand that their people are their most valuable asset, and they treat them accordingly.
So we've got process, agility, and people. What else can we learn from the Air Force's approach? Well, I think another important takeaway is the need to be proactive when it comes to security. The Air Force doesn't just wait for security breaches to happen. They're constantly looking for ways to improve the security of PRPS and stay ahead of the curve when it comes to like these emerging threats.
So it's not just about reacting to problems, it's about anticipating them and like preventing them from happening in the first place. Exactly. And that requires a mindset shift. You have to move from a reactive approach to a proactive approach.
And that takes, real commitment from leadership, right?
Absolutely. Security can't be an afterthought. It has to be baked into the culture of the organization from the top down.
So process, agility, people, and proactive security. Those are some pretty valuable lessons, and I think they're applicable to any organization, regardless of like their size or their industry.
I agree. And I think they all point to like a broader theme, the need to embrace a culture of continuous improvement. The Air Force is not content to just rest on their laurels, They're always looking for ways to do things better, be more efficient, be more secure, be more innovative.
And that's something we can all learn from. It's about never being satisfied with the status quo, right?
Yeah,
It's about always striving to be better.
exactly. And that's how you stay ahead of the curve in a world that's constantly changing.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of PRPS, what's the one big takeaway that you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Complexity doesn't have to be a barrier to success. In fact, by embracing the right processes, fostering a culture of agility and collaboration, investing in your people, and being proactive about security, you can not only manage complexity, but you can thrive in it.
That's a great point. It's not about avoiding complexity. It's about learning how to navigate it effectively.
Exactly. And the Air Force's experience with PRPS provides, a great roadmap for how to do that.
I completely agree. Well, this has been a fascinating journey, and I think we've all learned a lot about, the U.S. Air Force's PRPS and what it takes to manage a mission-critical system in today's, kind of complex world.
It's amazing what you can learn when you, take a deep dive into something that you might have otherwise overlooked.
That's the beauty of the deep dive. We take these seemingly ordinary topics and uncover the extraordinary stories behind them. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to, keep exploring the world of a curious mind. Until next time, keep diving deep.